All right, well, starting this year, teachers in Iowa could have been punished for violating a state law that bans books that depict sex, but a judge stopped that law from taking effect. Now, schools are trying to figure out how to proceed as the issue plays out in court. So TV6's Matt Christensen is joining me now to discuss the latest. Matt, obviously, this is a really hot button issue, right?
Sure.
One taking not just Iowa, but also the nation by storm. So where are the court proceedings at right now?
Well, in Iowa, there are two main cases that are proceeding, and right now there's a hold on a portion of the law. There are two parts of the law that are controversial. One has to do with access to books, and another has to do with gender identity. And I think what I'll talk about today is a little bit more on the books, because that's the part that the courts are addressing now. And this started with Senate 496 in the spring, and it was signed into law by the governor, and it essentially outlaws sex acts to be depicted in books and school libraries. A large book publisher, Penguin, sued, along with the ACLU and a couple of high-profile authors, and then some folks who were affected, some students and their parents. And fast forward to just a couple of weeks ago, a judge then granted an injunction in that case, saying that the part of the law that had to do with book bans is on hold now while the rest of that plays out. So that's where we're at.
Okay, and I think if I remember correctly, it was because the law was too vague.
Right. That was the legal reasoning behind it. Is the law is too broad the way it's written. The judge really came down on the state around this issue. And you know, I read a lot of legal opinions, and this one you could really see the judge's emotion in it and his frustration with the law. He said that you know, banning these sorts of depictions would result in the removal of books that aren't intended to be removed from the library under the law. Those include the Bible, the Iowa Legal Code, dictionaries, works of historic literature, even self-help books about, you know, kids being bullied and those sorts of things. So that part of the law is on hold right now, and so we'll wait to see as the rest of that plays out in court. Is sort of the next step.
Right. So, you know, before this was this, you know, injunction took place, how were districts in our specific area handling the issue?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there wasn't a uniform policy necessarily that every district, you know, subscribed to. Every district sort of is allowed to make curriculum decisions on its own to a large degree. There's a lot of autonomy there, and really the decision making comes down to school librarians a lot of times on what teachers or what books are going to be in the classrooms, in the libraries, and the teachers have a lot of say in that as well. So, you know, schools were sort of, you know, doing this when it comes to deciding what books are appropriate and what's not, or based on learning things like that, metrics and those kind of things. So, you know, right now though is what the law is trying to do is to get everybody to use that same state standard of, you know, here's what's appropriate and kind of here's what's not for a library, for a school.
And so lawyers weighed in on this issue, specifically the possibility that it violates the First Amendment, right? So what are they recommending school districts to do at this time?
Sure. I talked to some First Amendment lawyers who aren't directly involved in the case, but are obviously advocates for free speech. And what they are recommending the districts do is immediately ignore Senate File 496, ignore the law as it was written, at least the book point, and go back to whatever policies were in place before the law went into effect. Some districts are doing that. Not every district is. So that's one of the things that, you know, as part of our continuing coverage, we're trying to kind of unpack where a lot of our local districts are at and how they're trying to balance this right now, because that's where we're really at right now, is what books are appropriate for my children or other children to read in schools, and who's the decision maker around those policies. And that's the big question that we're really trying to grapple with right now.
Right. I think it's interesting, you know, the part of where the judge said it's kind of vague. It does seem a little broad right now, where you're talking about the Bible or Iowa Code could be taken out of schools. Yeah.
So for her part, and you know, this is really something pushed by the GOP, but Kim Reynolds has issued some statements in the wake of the court loss most recently in the injunction, and essentially what she said was that it's ridiculous to be discussing this, that people know a sex act when they see it, and that we shouldn't get in the weeds on this sort of thing, that really it's the safety of children that is front of mind for her.
And so on the flip side, we cover two areas. We cover Iowa, we cover Illinois. Illinois passed a law barring funding for libraries that actually take books off the shelf. So they have almost, 180, 360 on this situation. And so what can you tell us about Illinois' side of this?
Yeah, this is where we get it when we live in the Quad Cities, right? One state has one set of standards and another state might have a completely opposite set of standards. So, our viewers are really sort of, depending on which side of the river you live on, you've got a completely different policy that you're living under. And the one in Illinois, you're exactly right. And that was another bill that came through this year. Or last year, my apologies, last year, and Governor Pritzker signed that into law. And essentially what that says is that Illinois libraries have to follow what's called the Library Bill of Rights, which is, I think, an American Library Association guidelines. And, what that law does is it really leaves it into the hands of librarians or child development people to make the decisions about what materials are appropriate for children or what access children can have to some of those materials. But it does have a little bit of carrot and stick. It's got some stick in the law where if libraries are violating, their funding could be in jeopardy. So Illinois is really trying to coalesce around this idea of access to books, and you're kind of seeing that in Iowa as well, but just in a different way.
Right. And so obviously you mentioned this is a story we're going to continue to follow. It's not done yet. There's still lots to come. Where do we go from here? Yeah,
I talked to Pleasant Valley, and they've given some guidance to teachers that tell them to err on the side of caution.
Okay.
But really, parents have a large say in this right now, regardless of where the law is at in the process or the injunctions or whatever. In Iowa and in our communities, you can go online to your school's district website, and as part of the new law, they should have a library of titles that you can actually see what's in the classroom, and then you can opt to have your child not have access to those books. So, in the interim, as this plays out, if you're concerned about what access your child has, those are some real practical steps that you can take now.
Yeah.
But I'll continue to follow this as we learn more about how districts are handling this. I've got FOIA's Freedom of Information requests out to Davenport, Bettendorf, some other districts on what titles are they identifying for removal if they are doing that right now, and what guidance are they giving to teachers? Because that's the other thing I heard from teachers too, is that this is just really, really difficult position to put them in because there's just so much unclear about the law right now. So we'll see.
All right. Well, Matt, we appreciate your time this morning, and this is something that we're going to continue doing. Matt and I are going to sit down. We're going to talk about all the different stories that he is covering, that he's following up on, and it's kind of just something that we want to do to peel back that layer and just show you guys some of the work that we're doing here at TV6 and our process behind it. So thank you guys for joining us, and stay tuned for next time.